It was a quiet afternoon when I got the call. I was just finishing up a cup of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table and staring out the window at the garden I'd spent years tending to. The air was warm, a hint of summer still hanging in the breeze, and for a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Then the phone rang. It was Meredith. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. I answered, knowing what I would hear before she even said it. "Mum," she started, her voice chirping like usual. "Ben, the kids and his parents are moving in with you. Their flat's too small, and there's no other way. It's settled. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this? Settled." Like I didn't even need to be asked. I paused, my fingers tightening around the mug. My heart skipped a beat, then thudded louder than it should have. I kept my voice steady, trying not to let her hear the surprise or the anger. "Oh," I said, keeping it casual. "That's okay, I guess." She went on about logistics, about how it would only be for a while, just until they could find something more permanent. But the more she spoke, the more I felt the walls around me close in. Their flat was too small, and now mine was too. Just like that. The place I'd carved out for myself, where I could breathe again, was suddenly not mine at all. I wanted to argue, to say, no, this is my home, my space, my sanctuary. But I didn't. Because when did I ever argue with Meredith? When had I ever not just accepted what was handed to me, even when it was clear that I was being ignored, even when it felt like my place in the family had been worn down to nothing? I swallowed the words that would have sparked a fight. Instead, I muttered something about it being fine, because I wasn't going to be the mother who refused to help, the mother who caused drama. That was the last thing I wanted, but deep down I could feel it, the slow burn of betrayal. I hung up the phone, but the words echoed in my mind, louder than I wanted them to be. Settled. This decision wasn't up for discussion, not with me at least. I was just the place to crash. It wasn't even just Meredith and Ben. It was their kids, my grandkids, and Ben's parents, Clara and Mark. A full house. And it would be my house, wouldn't it? Not for long. This wasn't the home I had spent years making a safe place, a retreat, a sanctuary. Now it was just going to be another space to be filled with others' lives, their clutter, their noise. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window again. The garden didn't feel like mine anymore. The house didn't either. They were already coming, packing up their lives and moving them into mine. And for what? I thought about the years I'd spent, raising Meredith, putting my heart and soul into making sure she had everything she needed, always sacrificing my own happiness. I thought about how, after everything, this was how they saw me, as the fallback, as the option when everything else failed. And I, as always, would say yes. It wasn't that I didn't love them, I did, but I felt, I don't know, invisible. I'd given up so much for them. When Meredith was little, I'd spent sleepless nights worrying about her future. When she was older, I put aside my own dreams to help her build hers. And now, what did I have? A house I'd worked for, fought for, made a home for me. But somehow I had become the afterthought in my own life. I could feel the tightness in my chest, but I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to lose control. Not now. Not when it felt like everything I had was slipping through my fingers. I spent the next few days going through the motions, making sure everything was ready for them. I cleaned the guest rooms, moved a few things around, and pretended that I wasn't slowly dying inside. They were coming, and I had to make sure they were comfortable. I didn't have a choice, but as I cleaned, as I prepared, the anger started to build. Not just anger at them, anger at myself for letting it go this far, for giving them the power to make decisions for me. I didn't deserve this, not after all these years of giving, and that's when I made a decision. I wouldn't let this happen quietly. I wouldn't let my home become theirs without a fight. I was going to take control again. Of my life, of my home, of everything. Meredith and Ben would understand. They would have to understand. If they didn't, then so be it. I wasn't going to be pushed aside any longer. I wasn't going to quietly accept this sacrifice, not again. I'd given too much of myself to be treated like this. My comfort, my privacy, it all mattered. And if I had to fight for it, then that's exactly what I'd do. So I began planning how to take back my house, my life, and my place in this family. The thought alone felt like a breath of fresh air. There was hope in it, a chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control again. I wasn't just Linda anymore, the mother who always says yes. I wasn't going to be the one who quietly accepted whatever came her way. I was going to fight for myself, for my home, and for my peace. No more being invisible, no more giving in. It was time to take back what I had lost. And I would. When they arrived, it didn't take long for the changes to begin. Meredith, Ben, Clara, and Mark, they all walked through the front door, their faces full of excitement. The kids were bouncing around, trying to find their new places to run. It was like they hadn't even noticed that this wasn't their house. It wasn't even the excitement of settling in. It was more like they already owned the place. "Mum, I was thinking we can move this couch to the other side," Meredith said, her voice carrying that casual, confident tone I knew all too well. "It'll open up the space more, don't you think?" I nodded quietly, unsure of what to say. There was no point in arguing. They had already made up their minds about everything. Ben, Mark, and Clara were in the kitchen, opening cabinets and pulling out dishes like they belonged here, like this was their home. I sat in the living room, watching them. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My house, my sanctuary, was slowly being taken over. The furniture that I had carefully chosen, the decorations that had meant something to me, they were being moved around, adjusted, replaced. Ben even started unpacking boxes into a space I had always kept for myself. He placed his things in my study, without asking, without any thought about the fact that this was my home, my space. Everything felt wrong. They kept saying it was temporary, that they just needed a place to stay for a little while, but the truth was hitting me hard. It wasn't just temporary. It felt like they were here to stay, and they were making it clear that they had no intention of leaving anytime soon. "Mum, I moved the lamp over here," Meredith called from the living room, her voice full of cheer, as if she'd made a great improvement. "This looks way better, don't you think?" I gave a small, tight smile. "Looks good," I said, trying to hold back the frustration building inside me. But inside, all I could think was, this is my space. This is my home. Why don't they see that? I stood up and walked toward the living room. They were all standing there, rearranging, unpacking, making decisions without a second thought. The space was no longer just mine. It was becoming theirs. And I hated it. "Meredith," I started, trying to keep my voice calm. "We talked about this, right? I'm okay with you staying for a bit, but these changes, they feel a little much. I don't mind some help around the house, but I'd like to keep a say in how things are arranged." Meredith looked at me, a small frown tugging at the corners of her mouth, but she didn't seem bothered by it. "Oh, Mum, I'm just trying to make it work. It's just until we find our own place, right? Just a little reorganization for now. Nothing permanent." She smiled like it was no big deal, but it was a big deal. My stomach churned as I stood there, watching her brush it off. Nothing permanent. The word stung. I was being told that nothing about my home was permanent, not even my right to decide what stayed and what went. "Mom," Ben said, walking up behind me, "it's just a couch. We're making it better, you'll see. It'll be more comfortable for everyone." Comfortable for everyone but me, I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I forced another smile, trying to hide the frustration that was bubbling up inside me. It felt like they were treating me like I didn't matter anymore. This house, the place I had worked so hard to make a home, was being turned into just a space for everyone else to take over. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. This wasn't just about a couch or the kitchen or the study. It was about my life, my choices, my space. And suddenly, I wasn't in control of any of it. I was just standing by, watching it all slip through my fingers, and that feeling of helplessness was like a weight on my chest. I walked into the kitchen, where Clara and Mark were unpacking their things, chatting away as if they'd always lived here. They didn't seem to notice how uncomfortable I felt, or maybe they just didn't care. "Clara, Mark," I said, trying to sound neutral. "I know we're all trying to settle in, but please be careful where you put things. I've kept certain spaces in a way that makes sense for me. Just, keep that in mind." Clara turned to me, her face soft but not really apologetic. "Oh, of course, Linda. We didn't mean to step on any toes." But there was no genuine understanding in her voice. It was all polite words, with no real meaning behind them. I felt my anger rising. I tried to push it down, but it was getting harder to keep it in check. I had given so much. I had done everything I could for this family, and now it felt like none of it mattered. They were here, taking over, and I was expected to just roll with it. I stepped back into the living room, where Meredith was still rearranging the furniture. I wanted to shout at her, tell her to stop, to think about how this was affecting me. But I didn't. I just stood there, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you to understand," I said, finally letting the words out. "This is my house. I've worked hard for everything in it. I can't just let you move things around and make decisions without asking. It's not just a couch, Meredith. It's my life, my space. I'm not asking for much, just a little respect." Meredith stopped, looking at me with a mix of confusion and frustration. "Mom, come on. It's just a few changes. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," I said, "is that I'm losing control over my own home. I've given you everything, Meredith. I've been there for you all these years. And now, it feels like I don't have a say in anything anymore." Her face softened, but I could tell she didn't really understand. She didn't see it the way I did. To her, this was just about making things easier, making it more comfortable for the family. But for me, it was about losing my place, losing my home. I took a deep breath and turned away from her. I wasn't going to let her see how much this hurt. I wasn't going to let her see how small I felt. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this go on. I wasn't going to sit back and let them take over everything I had built. Not without a fight. I started planning my next move. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let them push me around. This was my house, my life, and I was going to take it back. The thought of it gave me a sense of clarity. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I was going to make sure they understood that my comfort mattered too. The days that followed were a blur of movement and noise. I watched as Meredith, Ben, Clara, and Mark continued to make themselves at home, occupying space that used to be just mine. The changes were small at first, a lamp here, a vase there, but they quickly added up. It was like they were slowly erasing the person I had worked so hard to become, the woman who had created a life for herself after so many years of sacrifice. Now, everything that I had worked for felt like it was slipping away. I was angry, but most of all, I was scared. Scared that I was losing my place in my own life, in my own home. One evening, after a long day of pretending everything was fine, I sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, trying to clear my mind. The house was quiet for once, and I needed a moment of peace. I stared at the empty space where my plans had once been, plans to rebuild my life, to find comfort in the space I had created. But now it was all being taken over. I couldn't do this anymore. I needed to take control. I thought about Benjamin, an old colleague from my time at the local police department. Benjamin had been a friend, someone I trusted. He'd always been good to me, and I knew that he could help me. He had access to information, and I needed it now more than ever. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, my fingers trembling just slightly. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I knew this was the moment I needed to reach out. "Benjamin," I said when he picked up. "It's Linda. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the surprise in his voice when he responded. "Linda, it's been a while. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've got a situation, a big one. I need information about Ben, my daughter's husband, and his business partner. I think they've been doing some shady things. I need to know what they're up to." Benjamin didn't hesitate. "I'll see what I can dig up. Give me a couple of days." I hung up, feeling a small sense of relief. Benjamin was going to help me. I wasn't alone in this. The next few days were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. I tried to keep up with the routine, pretending nothing had changed, but inside, I was seething. I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed to take action, and I had to do it quickly. Then, one morning, I got the call from Benjamin. "I've got something," he said, his voice low, almost like he was speaking in code. "Ben and his business partner have been up to something. I found some documents, some communications. They've been planning to sell part of your house. Without your permission. They've been setting up deals under the table." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't even know what to say at first. My hands were shaking as I held the phone to my ear, trying to process the shock. "Are you serious?" I finally managed to say. "They've been trying to sell part of my house? Without me knowing?" "They're setting it up, Linda. They've been working on it for months. It's clear they plan to take over the property. They were going to sell a piece of it, pocket the money, and leave you with nothing. They've been hiding it from you." The rage that boiled inside me was unlike anything I had felt before. My own daughter, her husband, and his family, they were trying to steal from me. I had worked so hard to make that house mine. It was the one thing I had left to call my own. And now, they were trying to take that too. It was the final straw. I couldn't let this go. "Okay," I said, my voice steady now, though the anger still burned. "I need everything. All the information you can get. I'm going to take them down. I'm going to make sure they don't get away with this." Benjamin's voice softened. "I'll send you everything I have. We can't let them get away with this, Linda. But you need to be careful. If they're doing something this big, they'll fight back." "I know," I replied, the resolve in my voice clearer than ever. "I'm ready." The call ended, and I sat in silence for a few moments. The weight of it all settled on my shoulders. I couldn't believe how far they'd gone, how little they thought of me. But this was the point of no return. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. I spent the next few days going through the information Benjamin had sent. I had every document, every piece of evidence that would show how Ben and Meredith had planned this behind my back. They were trying to steal from me, and I was going to make sure the truth came out. As I looked through the documents, a plan started to form in my mind. I would fight back. I would use the law to take back control of my home, and I would use everything at my disposal to make sure they couldn't get away with it. I realized in that moment that I had the upper hand. I had the truth, and with the right legal support, I could reclaim everything they had tried to take. The feeling of power, of control, surged through me. This wasn't just about a house. This was about respect, about taking back my life. I knew what I had to do now. I wasn't going to sit back anymore. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to stop until I had my house back, until I had control over my life again. I started collecting the necessary documents, making sure everything was in order. I would file the right paperwork, go to court, and make sure everyone saw the truth. This would be my fight, and I was going to win. They thought they could take what was mine. They were wrong. I had everything I needed. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. I was ready. The days after Benjamin sent me the evidence felt like an endless waiting game. I spent every moment combing through the papers, reading emails, and looking at the records he had sent. Each document, Each piece of information felt like another weight lifting off my chest. It was like I was finally seeing clearly, realizing that all this time I'd been played. But now, I had something they didn't have. I had the truth. I had proof. With every passing day, the anger inside me grew more focused. The rage was still there, but it had transformed into something else. It was determination now, a sharp clarity. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them walk all over me anymore. No, I was going to take control back, no matter what it took. I knew what I had to do. It was time to make it official. I picked up the phone and called Benjamin again, my hands trembling slightly. I was nervous, yes, but there was no turning back. "Benjamin, I'm ready to move forward," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "I want to file a legal claim to regain full ownership of my house." I could hear the approval in his voice. "Good. I'll help you with the paperwork. We'll make sure you have everything you need to back up your claim." That was all I needed to hear. I took a deep breath and started collecting everything. I had the documents, the emails, the proof that Ben and Meredith had been scheming behind my back. I had what I needed to show that they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. I'd worked too hard for this house to let anyone take it from me. As I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the paperwork, I felt a shift in myself. For the first time in a long while, I felt empowered. This was mine. It had always been mine. And now, I was taking it back. I thought about the years I had spent raising Meredith, making sacrifices for her. I thought about the late nights, the years of putting her first, always putting myself last. But not anymore. Not this time. This time, I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. And I wasn't going to apologize for it. I worked late into the night, gathering every document I needed. Each form, each piece of evidence, felt like another step closer to taking back control. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my place in this family. When I was ready, I filed the legal claim. I was nervous, but at the same time, I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt in years. I was finally doing something for myself. For once, it wasn't about Meredith. It wasn't about Ben or anyone else. It was about me. I was taking the first serious step in regaining my home, and I wasn't going to stop until I had it back. The following days were a blur. I had to keep up the routine, pretend everything was fine, but inside, I was on edge. Every time I heard the door open, every time I saw one of them walk through the house, I felt that anger flare up again. I couldn't let them get away with it. Not this time. When the papers were officially filed, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The first step was done. But it wasn't over. Not yet. I knew this was only the beginning. I had to keep going. I had to see this through. I started to feel more confident, more in control. The fear I had been carrying with me for so long was starting to fade. It was replaced by a quiet confidence. I was doing something for myself, something that I had been too afraid to do for far too long. I was standing up for my rights, and it felt good. I was doing what I should have done years ago. I had let people walk all over me for too long, but not anymore. I wasn't going to let my family take what was mine. I sat back in my chair and looked around the house. This was mine. I had worked for it, I had earned it, and I wasn't going to lose it to anyone. When I finally called Benjamin to let him know that the papers had been filed, I could hear the approval in his voice again. "You're doing the right thing, Linda. You've got this." I didn't doubt it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the power to change things. I felt like I had control. But the real fight was just beginning. I wasn't going to let them have this house. I wasn't going to let them take my life away from me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that. They would fight back. They would try to manipulate me, try to push me into backing down. But I was done being manipulated. I wasn't going to back down this time. I was ready for whatever came next. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had taken the first step, and I wasn't going to stop until I had everything I'd worked for. I had the truth. I had the documents. I had the support. And I had myself. This was my fight, and I was going to win. The days after I filed the lawsuit felt like a ticking clock. I knew that things were about to get even harder, and I was right. Meredith and Ben weren't as calm as they let on. They hadn't expected me to actually take action. They didn't think I had it in me to fight for what was mine, but they quickly learned that they had underestimated me. It started with small things, little attempts to make me feel guilty. Meredith called, her voice softer than usual, trying to act like everything was still fine. "Mom, I think you're overreacting," she said one evening. "I don't want this to come between us, I really don't. But filing a lawsuit, it just feels too much. We're family." I could feel her trying to manipulate me with that tone. The one she always used when she wanted something, but this time, I didn't let it get to me. "Meredith," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I've made my decision. You and Ben have been taking advantage of me for far too long. This house is mine. You can't just move in and make changes without asking. You didn't even consider what I wanted." Her response was quick, defensive. "We're just trying to make things easier for everyone. Why can't you see that? This is temporary, Mom, just until we get back on our feet. I'm not trying to take anything from you." But I knew better. This wasn't temporary. They were already acting like they owned the place. Moving my things, unpacking their stuff like it was their home. They weren't interested in getting back on their feet. They were interested in taking everything from me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. "I'm not dropping the lawsuit," I said firmly. "And you should understand that. This isn't about making things easier for you. This is about me taking control of my own life. You need to respect that." There was silence on the other end. I could hear Meredith's breath, the frustration in it, but I didn't care. I was done letting her guilt trip me. I had made up my mind. This was about more than just a house. This was about respect. My respect. The next day, I heard from Ben. His call came just before dinner, and I could already tell by the tone of his voice that he was desperate. "Linda," he said, trying to sound calm but failing, "we need to talk. You don't understand what you're doing. We're family. You can't just kick us out like this. You have no idea how hard things are for us right now." I didn't respond right away. I let his words hang in the air. He wanted me to feel guilty, to feel sorry for them. But I wasn't going to fall for it. They had done enough to me already, and I knew deep down that if I gave in now, they'd walk all over me again. "I understand exactly what's happening," I said slowly. "You and Meredith think you can take what's mine. You think that just because you're family, you get to control everything. But that's not how this works. I've worked too hard for this house. I'm not backing down." I could hear Ben take a deep breath. "Look, we don't want to fight with you, but you need to drop the lawsuit. Please, Linda, it's not worth destroying our family over." I didn't say anything at first. What was there to say? I wasn't destroying the family. They were. They were the ones who thought they could walk all over me. They were the ones who were taking advantage of my kindness. And now I had had enough. "I'm not dropping the lawsuit, Ben," I said, my voice steady. "And you need to understand something. This isn't just about the house. It's about me. I've spent my life taking care of everyone else, putting my needs last. But not anymore. This is my fight now, and I'm going to win." There was a long silence on the other end, and then Ben sighed. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" "I am," I said, my voice resolute, "and I'm not backing down." When I hung up the phone, I felt the weight of the decision settle in, but I also felt something else, relief. For the first time in a long time, I was standing up for myself. I wasn't backing down, and I wasn't going to be pushed around anymore. But I knew it wasn't enough just to fight for the house. No, I had to take it further. I had to show them that I wasn't just protecting my home. I was protecting my dignity. That's when I made my next move. I sat down and started making calls. I reached out to my lawyer, Benjamin, and told him I was filing another claim, this time for custody of my grandchildren. Meredith and Ben had always been so focused on their business that they'd neglected their kids. I'd seen it for years. The kids barely got attention from their parents, always left with a sitter, or ignored in favor of whatever deal Ben was working on. They weren't being taken care of the way they deserved. I wasn't going to let that continue. I couldn't. I had spent years raising Meredith, doing everything I could to make sure she was loved, taken care of, and nurtured. And now, I was going to make sure her kids had the same thing. When I told Benjamin what I was planning, he didn't hesitate. "You're right," he said. "They've shown no interest in the kids. You have every right to fight for custody. You can do this." So I started collecting evidence, more documents, more proof that Meredith and Ben weren't fit to take care of their children. It was hard. It was painful to admit, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The kids deserved better, and I was going to make sure they got it. As I sat there, looking through the papers, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my grandchildren's future. It was about standing up for what was right. I wasn't going to let them take my house, and I wasn't going to let them take my grandchildren. I was done being the passive one. I was done being the one who always gave in. Now I was going to fight for what was mine, and I was going to win. It didn't take long for Ben and Meredith to realize that their plan wasn't working. The house wasn't just going to become theirs, not without a fight. They had seen me take action, and now they were worried. I could feel the shift, the tension that started building between us, but this time I wasn't going to back down. The phone call came on a quiet evening. I was just finishing up dinner when my phone buzzed. I looked down, saw Meredith's name on the screen, and for a moment I hesitated. What could she possibly want now? But I picked up anyway. Maybe this time it would be different. "Mom?" Meredith's voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." I didn't respond right away. I could feel my pulse quicken, my stomach tightening. I knew what was coming. This wasn't going to be another one of those conversations where she just wanted to vent. This was her attempt to fix things, to get me to drop the lawsuit. I didn't want to hear it, but I also knew that I had to. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "We've been thinking, and we don't want to make things worse. We really don't, Mum. We just want to stay here for a little while. We're not trying to take over your life, your home. If you'll just let us stay without all the legal stuff. We promise. We won't interfere with anything. We'll keep out of your way. You won't even know we're here." I sat back in my chair, letting her words sink in. "So, you want me to drop the lawsuit," I said slowly, "and just let you stay here, after everything that's happened?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her shuffling papers, maybe even running a hand through her hair. "Yes, Mom, that's all we're asking. Just let us stay. Let us get back on our feet, and we'll make sure everything stays the way it was. We won't touch anything in the house. You won't even notice we're here, I promise." I could feel my anger starting to build again. Let us stay. That was their offer, to stay in my house, but at the cost of my peace, my comfort, my autonomy. They had no idea what they were asking. They thought I would just accept them back in, after everything they'd done. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. "Meredith," I said, my voice calm but firm, "this isn't about you staying or not staying. It's about respect. It's about you and Ben thinking you can just take whatever you want. I'm not going to pretend like nothing happened. You've crossed a line, and I'm not going to just let that go." There was another silence. I could hear Meredith on the other end, struggling to find the right words, but I knew this was going nowhere. They wanted me to back down, to give up the fight, to give in like I always had, but I wasn't going to do that. "We'll leave, Mum," Meredith said quietly, "but please don't do this. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this." I wanted to scream at her that they were the ones who had started this fight. They were the ones who had pushed me into a corner. but I didn't. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. Meredith, I'm not fighting you, but I am fighting for myself, for my life, and for my grandchildren. You and Ben may think you can control everything, but you can't. I'm not going to let you do it anymore. Her voice cracked slightly, and I could hear her frustration. Mum, you don't understand. It's hard for us. You're making it harder. You're tearing this family apart. I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. No, Meredith, what's tearing this family apart is the way you and Ben have been treating me. This isn't about making it harder for you. This is about me taking back control of my life. I've given you everything. I've been there for you, for Ben, for the kids. And now it's time for me to stand up for myself. Meredith didn't respond at first, and I could feel the weight of the silence hanging between us. But I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into backing down. I had made my decision. This was bigger than a house or a lawsuit. It was about my dignity, my peace, and my role in this family. I'm not going to drop the lawsuit, I said finally, and I'm going to take it further. I'm filing for custody of the kids. They deserve better than what you and Ben are giving them. You've been so caught up in your own lives that you've neglected them, and I can't let that happen anymore. Meredith's voice was a whisper. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying that I'm filing for custody, I repeated. The kids need someone who will put them first, someone who isn't distracted by money or business deals. They need someone who will love them and care for them properly, and I'm going to be that person. I heard her start to say something, but I cut her off. I'm done, Meredith. This isn't just about the house. It's about the kids, and I'm going to make sure they have the life they deserve. The conversation ended there, and I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this was going to cause even more of a rift between us, but I didn't care anymore. I was tired of always being the one who gave in, the one who sacrificed. I wasn't going to let my grandchildren suffer just because their parents were too focused on their own ambitions. The next day, I started gathering everything I needed for the custody case. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had to do it. The evidence was there. The signs were clear. Meredith and Ben weren't capable of giving their children the care they needed, and I was going to fight for them. I called my lawyer, Benjamin, to let him know that I was moving forward. I'm filing for custody, I told him. I want to make sure the kids have the best chance at a good life, and that means they need to be with me. Benjamin didn't hesitate. We'll start working on it right away, Linda. You're doing the right thing. We'll get this moving. As I hung up the phone, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for my grandchildren's future. And I wasn't going to stop until I had won. The weight of it all was starting to settle in, but in a way, it felt like a relief. Every piece of evidence I gathered, every conversation I had, was pushing me closer to what I knew was the right thing to do: fight for my grandchildren. Meredith and Ben, despite their promises, had shown me time and time again that they weren't capable of putting their kids first. I couldn't sit by and let them continue to prioritize their business and their lives while their children suffered. I could see it now, more clearly than ever. The kids weren't getting the love and care they needed. They were being ignored in favor of whatever deal Ben was making or whatever Meredith thought was more important at the time. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I had been raising Meredith on my own for years, and I knew what it took to care for a child. To truly care. And Ben and Meredith weren't doing it. I spent days gathering more evidence, looking for anything that could support my case for custody. I spoke to neighbors, friends, anyone who might have witnessed the neglect or the constant absence of proper parenting. I wasn't just trying to win the case. I was trying to give my grandchildren a future where they didn't feel invisible, a future where they knew that someone loved them unconditionally. I reached out to child psychologists, people who could give me a professional perspective on the situation. I wasn't surprised when they agreed with what I had already suspected. The children were suffering from emotional neglect. They weren't being provided the stability or the attention that every child needs. The psychologist I spoke to was direct and no nonsense. The kids need consistency, Linda. They need structure, love, and the kind of support only someone who's fully invested can provide. From what you've described, they're not getting that from Meredith and Ben. You're their best option. That hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for their well-being. I wasn't just doing this because it was the right thing for me. It was the right thing for them. They deserved better. They deserved me. I started to feel more confident in my fight, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the psychological toll this was taking on me. Every time I saw Ben or Meredith's face, I was reminded of everything they had done. Every time I had to look at their indifference, their focus on their own lives while their children went without, it was like a sharp reminder that I wasn't just fighting a legal battle, I was fighting for my family's future. I spent hours at the kitchen table, looking over everything: court documents, psychologist reports, the testimonies of neighbors and friends who saw how often the kids were left to fend for themselves. I was methodical about it. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Everything had to be perfect. And as the days went on, something inside me changed. I had always been the one to take care of everyone else, always putting others first. But now, I realized something important. I wasn't just doing this for me. I wasn't just reclaiming my house. I was reclaiming the responsibility of loving and caring for these children. The children who deserved more than to be caught in a tug-of-war between two parents who weren't fully there for them. I met with my lawyer, Benjamin, to go over everything. He had been with me every step of the way, and I knew I couldn't do this without him. "We've got a strong case," he said, reviewing the documents. "The evidence is solid, Linda. You've got the support of the psychologists, the testimonies. The court is likely to agree with you." It was hard to believe, but hearing it from Benjamin, someone who knew this process, gave me the push I needed. This was real. This could actually happen. I could get my grandchildren the life they deserved. But I wasn't naive. I knew that Ben and Meredith would fight back. They would try to manipulate the situation, just like they always had. They would make me out to be the villain if they could. But I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them make me feel guilty anymore. They had done enough. They had crossed a line, and I was drawing one of my own. I spent every day preparing, every moment focused on what needed to be done next. I called social services, seeking their support. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it was necessary. When I finally met with a caseworker, I could see in her eyes that she understood. She didn't look at me with suspicion, like I was some angry grandmother trying to stir up trouble. She looked at me with empathy, understanding the urgency of the situation. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "These kids need someone who will fight for them. You've got the right to do this, and from everything I've seen, you're the one who can provide the stability they need." Hearing that made me feel like I wasn't alone in this fight. It wasn't just me pushing against Ben and Meredith anymore. It was a collective effort to give those kids the love and attention they deserved. As the weeks passed, the weight of everything began to settle on me. It wasn't easy, and I wasn't naive about the challenges that lay ahead. But I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to turn back. This fight wasn't just for me anymore. It was for my grandchildren. It was for their future, their safety, and their happiness. The more I worked on my case, the more confident I became. Every bit of support I received, whether it was from the psychologists, the neighbors, or social services, made me feel like I was on the right path. And as I sat at my kitchen table, poring over the last of the documents, I realized something. I was no longer the woman who had given up everything for others. I was no longer the one who always put herself last. I was fighting for my family, for my future, and for the children who needed me. And that made all the difference. This battle wasn't just about winning a legal case. It was about showing my grandchildren that they weren't invisible, that someone cared enough to stand up for them when no one else did. I would keep fighting, and I would do whatever it took to make sure they knew they were loved and cared for. The court would see that, and I would make sure of it. The days stretched into weeks, each one bringing me closer to the battle I knew was coming. The weight of the lawsuit for my home and the custody case for my grandchildren was becoming harder to carry. But at the same time, I felt a strength building inside me that I hadn't known I had. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my grandchildren, for their future, and for a life that was free from the neglect I had seen all too clearly. I had gathered all the evidence I could. Every piece of testimony, every document, every phone call I'd made, it was all carefully organized. I had the psychologist's reports, the neighbors' testimonies, and even records of the times Ben and Meredith had left their kids unsupervised. I had proof of everything that mattered, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The day of the hearing was approaching, and with every passing day, I could feel the anxiety building. But more than that, I felt a quiet confidence too. I knew I had the truth on my side, and that was the one thing they couldn't take from me. Ben and Meredith, on the other hand, were getting desperate. The phone calls started coming in more frequently. First, it was Meredith, then Ben, each of them trying to convince me that I was making a huge mistake. They tried to play on my emotions, pulling the family card over and over again. "Mom, please." Meredith's voice came through the phone one evening, strained. "This is tearing us apart. I know you're upset, but we just want to be together as a family. Don't do this. It's not too late to fix things." I didn't respond right away. I had heard these pleas too many times to count. They weren't sorry. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were just trying to manipulate me into backing down, and I wasn't going to let them. "I'm not doing this for me, Meredith," I said, my voice steady. "I'm doing this for the kids. You and Ben have put your business and your own lives ahead of their needs for too long. They deserve better. They deserve someone who will put them first. And that's what I'm doing." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Meredith spoke again, her voice quieter. "But, Mom, can't we just work this out without all the legal stuff? I don't want to lose you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wasn't the one who had been neglecting the children. I wasn't the one who had been putting myself and my business ahead of my kids' well-being. I was the one who had always been there for them. Always. "You're not losing me, Meredith," I said, trying to stay calm. "But I can't just sit by while you and Ben fail your kids. I've given you everything. Now it's time for me to do what's right for them, and that means they need to be with me." When the conversation ended, I sat for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. It wasn't easy. Every word she said still had the power to hurt me, but I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. This wasn't about her or Ben, it was about the kids, and I knew I had to do this for them. The next day, Ben called. He tried a different approach. "Linda," he started, his tone more forceful than usual, "you've gone too far with this. I'm telling you, if you don't drop the custody case, things are going to get ugly. You're forcing us into a corner, and I won't back down." I wasn't intimidated. "You've been forcing me into a corner for years," I replied. "You and Meredith have been taking advantage of me for far too long. I'm not going to let you do it anymore. This is about what's right for the kids, not what's convenient for you." Ben tried to keep the pressure on, pushing harder than before. "We can make this go away. If you drop the lawsuit, we'll cover your legal fees. We'll help you out. It's not worth going to court over this." I almost laughed. They were offering to help me out after everything they'd done. It was laughable. "You're not buying me off, Ben," I said, my voice cold. "I'm doing this because it's the right thing. For the kids. Not for you. Not for me. For them." The conversation ended there, but I knew it wasn't over. I had no illusions that they would just roll over. They would try everything they could to win, and I would be ready. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple but professional outfit that made me feel confident. I knew what I was about to face, and I wasn't going to let nerves shake me. I had spent months preparing for this day, and it wasn't just about winning, it was about giving my grandchildren a chance at a better life. Benjamin met me in the courthouse lobby, a reassuring presence in a sea of chaos. He gave me a quick nod as I approached, and we went over the strategy once more. "We've got everything we need," he said. "The judge will see that you're the best option for the kids. Just stay calm and we'll get through this." We walked into the courtroom together, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Ben and Meredith were already there, sitting together with their lawyer. They looked nervous, but they tried to hide it behind forced smiles. I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy, not after everything they'd put me through. The hearing started, and I kept my eyes focused on the judge, letting the evidence speak for itself. The testimonies were read, the reports from the psychologists and neighbors, and as the facts came out, I saw the shift in the room. The judge's expression never wavered, but I could tell he was listening, really listening to the truth. When the judge finally spoke, it was like the world paused for a moment. "I've reviewed all the evidence," he said, his voice firm. "And after careful consideration, I'm ruling in favor of Linda. She will have full custody of the children." It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally being heard. The decision was made. The kids would be with me. And that was where they belonged. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. I still had to win my home. I still had to make sure they couldn't take that from me too. But for now, I allowed myself a small moment of victory. The court had ruled in my favor. My grandchildren were going to be safe, and that was all that mattered. The day I had been waiting for finally arrived, but it didn't come with the fanfare I might have imagined. I sat in the small office, my lawyer Benjamin by my side, my hands clenched around the envelope that held the final court ruling. My heart pounded in my chest, the weight of what was about to happen settling heavily on me. But it wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was power. Benjamin looked over at me, his expression calm but knowing. He'd been there through every step of this long, drawn-out fight. "You've earned this, Linda," he said, his voice quiet. "This is your victory." I nodded, trying to focus, trying to breathe as I opened the envelope. My eyes scanned the words on the paper, my pulse quickening with every line I read. The judge's decision was final. Full custody of my grandchildren was now mine, and the house was legally mine to control. I couldn't help it. A small, victorious smile tugged at the corners of my lips, even as I felt a knot of emotion in my chest. This wasn't just about winning a legal case. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my family. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the one in control. I looked at Benjamin, and we shared a brief but meaningful glance. He gave me a reassuring nod, and I took a deep breath. "Let's do this," I said, my voice firm. It wasn't time for celebrations yet. The real work was still ahead of me. I had to make sure they understood that this was over, my house, my children, and now I had the legal backing to make it happen. We left the office together, and as I stepped into the courthouse hallway, I felt the weight of the moment hit me like a rush of cold air. This wasn't just a fight for property or for custody. It was the culmination of years of silent suffering, of sacrifices made without thanks, of moments where I had let myself be overlooked and disregarded. But not anymore. I knew exactly what I had to do. The hard part wasn't winning the case. The hard part was what came next. I called Meredith first. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation, but it was something I had to face. She answered quickly, sounding almost too calm, as if she already knew what was coming. "Mom?" Her voice was still hopeful, the tone a little strained. "What's going on?" "I have the ruling," I said, my voice steady. "I've been granted full custody of the kids. They're staying with me now, and the house is mine, Meredith. It's time for you and Ben to leave." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, then a sigh. "Mom, please, we can figure this out. We're family. Don't do this." I felt my patience thin. Meredith, this isn't about us anymore. You've had your chance to make things right, and you didn't. You and Ben had your chance to care for those kids, and you didn't. Now they're with me, where they belong. Her voice cracked slightly. You're really going to do this, aren't you? I've already done it, I said firmly. I'm not going back on this. You need to pack your things. You and Ben and your parents, everyone, must leave. By the end of the week. I'm giving you that time, but no longer. Meredith didn't say anything for a long moment, and when she finally spoke again, it was with a note of desperation in her voice. Mum, I don't want to fight with you. We've been through so much. Why can't we just work this out? Because you didn't respect me, Meredith, I said, my voice quiet but full of finality. You didn't respect what I've built, what I've worked for. I'm done making excuses for you. You'll have to figure things out on your own now. I hung up, my chest tight with emotion, but also filled with a strange sense of peace. I had said it. I had finally said the words that had been building up for years. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. Next, I called Ben. His voice was immediately defensive when he picked up. What's this I hear about the court ruling? He asked, his tone already filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. What are you trying to pull, Linda? I took a deep breath, my grip tightening on the phone. I'm not trying to pull anything. I'm taking control. You and Meredith need to leave my house. The kids are staying with me. The court has ruled in my favor, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't just kick us out, he shouted. We've done everything for you, and this is how you repay us. I felt my anger rise, but I kept my voice calm. You're not entitled to anything here, Ben. You and Meredith crossed the line, and now you need to face the consequences. You and your parents need to pack up and leave. Today, if possible. You're making a huge mistake, he spat, but I wasn't listening anymore. This conversation was over. I hung up, the finality of it all sinking in. I wasn't just taking back my house, I was taking back my life. I wasn't going to be a victim in my own home anymore. I was done letting them push me around. This was my time, my moment, and no one was going to take it from me. The following days were filled with a sense of surreal clarity. I watched as they packed their things. There was no fight left in them. They had tried to manipulate me. They had tried to control me, but I had stood my ground. And now, they were leaving. It was over. When the last of their things were gone, and the house was finally empty, I stood there, looking around, feeling the weight of everything that had led me to this point. I was standing in my home, the place I had fought for, the place that had always been my sanctuary. I had taken control. I had won. And for the first time in years, I could breathe again. My grandchildren were safe. They were with me, where they belonged, and nothing was going to change that. I wasn't going to let anyone take them from me, not ever again. I stood there in my home, fully in control, knowing that I had won. My family had been defeated, and now I was the one calling the shots. The house was mine, and the future of my grandchildren was secure with me. I had finally reclaimed everything that had always belonged to me. The final ruling was a weight off my shoulders, but it didn't feel like the end. It felt like a new beginning. After months of legal battles, confrontations, and sleepless nights, I had finally taken full control of everything that was mine. The house, my grandchildren, my life, it was all in my hands now. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace with it. Meredith and Ben were gone, and their parents too. They left without putting up much of a fight, despite all their promises of family and doing things the right way. I had taken the steps to ensure they wouldn't come back, and they knew it. The last few days had been a blur of packing up their things, of final goodbyes that carried no real emotion. They were gone, and I was finally free. The children, my grandchildren, were with me now. They weren't going anywhere. I had fought for them. I had stood up for them in a way that no one else had. And now they were safe. They were home. I walked through the house, my house, and it felt different. It was mine again, But more than that, it was a place of peace, of safety, for the first time in so long. The rooms that had been filled with tension and resentment were now quiet. No more fighting, no more manipulation. Just silence. A silence that was soothing, not oppressive. The kids were in the living room, playing quietly together. The sound of their laughter filled the space, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to smile. They were finally in a place where they could be happy, where they could feel secure and loved. The love I had always wanted for them. I sat down beside them, watching as they played. It felt so natural, so right. I thought about everything I'd gone through to get to this point, the years of giving everything to everyone else, the years of being ignored and taken advantage of. But now, I was the one in control. I was the one who had fought for the future of the people who truly mattered. I leaned back and let out a long breath. The weight that had been on me for so long, the anxiety, the fear, it was all gone. In its place, there was peace. I had done it. I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my family. And I had done it alone.